Hi, Ronnie.
Lori.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Hi, Lori.
Yes,
Jaylen.
please. I brought flowers to the
Oh my gosh.
We are going to waste no time.
Thank
Scoot
you,
on
please.
up.
Thank
you
you.
so much for coming. We are, it's comfortable, isn't it? You use it as much as you want tonight. I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 5:53 p.m. Today is March 18th, 2009. Are we streaming? Recording? Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you, Representative Curtis, for coming.
Oh, I'm just delighted. And please excuse me for being late. We just have packed too much in and we're recording, so I won't tell you that I was stopped by the Highway Patrol. Which further delayed us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Karen can help with that. She can share stories with you. She's, You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, I'm just delighted to be here with you. Thank you.
We have an agenda.
Good.
We are going to run through this as fast as we possibly can.
And I don't need but 5 minutes to transition at 7, so I'm good as long as you need me.
We might take it a little longer then. Okay, there
If
are
you're
snacks,
good
so
with that,
if you have pockets, we have snacks.
I have pockets.
Okay. Well, welcome. And in terms of introductions, should we forego introductions so we can get going? Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. We have something for you. So, Joette, do you want to come and join behind Mary for a bit of a ceremony for you?
Nice.
And Mary, would you like a microphone?
Maybe. Yeah, that might be nice.
Here we go. The camera's there, so where you're sitting is actually good. And Mike, you could probably just stay.
I could
Mike,
probably stand. I could probably use mine right here.
You can stay here, Mike. You can sit in your chair.
Okay. We obviously practiced this, didn't we? We should have. Let's just go up here.
Okay.
Okay. On behalf of the Grand County Council and Moab City, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to you for your commitment to serving this community. First, thank you for embracing the value of town halls across the 3rd Congressional District. We appreciate you coming to Moab to meet with us all, not just today, but repeatedly since your election. Your engagement has elevated the quality and caliber of communications between the Office of the 3rd District Representative and the Grand County and Moab local government and residents. We are grateful for that investment and look forward to building on the relationships we began. We also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your tremendous efforts to elevate funding for the Moab UMTRA project. Before you came into office, the project's budget was at a historic low. Thanks to your encouragement and support, particularly of the Moab Tailings Project Steering Committee Chair and County Council Member Mary McGann, plus your efforts to help us garner adequate appropriations in Washington, D.C. The project is on track and to be complete tailings removal some 7 years sooner, and to save taxpayers $150 million. We were also able to hire back 23 people into well-paying jobs at the UMTRA site. Thank you so much for making this possible, and thank you for your enthusiasm for continuing to assist the county and city in our annual UMTRA appropriation request efforts. Welcome back to Moab. We appreciate it.
Oh, how kind. Very good. Oh, how beautiful. That is. Isn't that beautiful?
And it's not even in the stores yet. It's a 2020.
Excellent.
So when we come next
year,
we'll look for that.
And
because of your sock collection.
Yes. So this is a problem because I have a display case in Washington for socks that are not worn, and I'm tempted to put it in there, but I'm also tempted to just put these on right now.
I think you can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We really can't express how grateful we are for the town hall, the town halls that you have done and you're doing tonight. It's incredible engagement, and it's something that we have been missing for a long time.
I actually enjoy them, and you'll probably smile at this. For several days, people have known that I'm coming to Moab, and they say, "Are you worried about the town hall in Moab?" I'm kind of a conservative guy, right? And I said, no, I love Moab. They're always great meetings, civil, great discussions, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. All right, on with our agenda. Remarks from you.
I'll be brief. And I've said a couple of things I'd like to say. I really am pleased to represent Moab. As we were driving out here today, we actually, one of the reasons we were late is we stopped. I've been to the site here of the tailings, but I've never been to the location where they're taking them to. So we actually stopped and saw those. But we came down through Emery County, Castledale, and through there. And I'm sure you've all followed the public lands bill there. And I got to tell you, we were driving along 70 with my district director, and we just kept interrupting our conversation with, wow, look at that. Isn't that amazing? And my heart just swelled with this pride of this public lands bill that preserving and protecting, and at the same time dealing with issues like grazing and recreation and all these other important issues that are very, very important. And just really pleased to be here and looking forward to working on your issues and being here with you today. And I won't take any more time, so we can keep moving through.
Well, that's on our discussion as public lands,
good,
so
good, yeah.
On our dialogue. So, well, great. Then, if we want to get right into the next item on the agenda is recent public lands legislation. I want to start by just saying thank you so much for the engagement process that you went through. I mean, you passed a wilderness bill and endangered fish.
Yeah, that came through at the same time, yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. And so Moab's very excited to welcome you, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of gratitude at tonight's town hall. But would you like to speak a little bit about those two?
I would. The first bill that I put in Congress was this, I call it my fish bill, and it deals with the waterways, the San Juan River and the Colorado River. Every time we do any work in those rivers, whether it's as simple as taking irrigation out for farming or a bridge or anything like that, it requires an offsetting mitigation project. And I didn't know this before, but we have 4 endangered species in those 2 rivers. And so my bill simply lined up the need to do a mitigation project with that project. It's a great bill. Not a single tax dollar is involved. And yet, it's working on saving 4 endangered species, and it's good for economic development and for agriculture who can have access to that water. So really pleased that was my first bill. By the way, it received a 392 to 6 vote in the House.
Wow.
Are they all going to be that easy from now on?
Piece of cake.
Healthcare will be.
And I'll tell you just something a little funny about that is they like to voice vote there. If they have a bill that's obviously going to pass, they'll try to do a voice vote just to save time. But any member of Congress can say, no, I want a recorded vote. So it was my first vote, and I said, no way, I want a recorded vote. And so we got that 392 to 6. And it was in this package of lands bills that went through, as was the public lands bill. I have another bill that I actually think is very, very good for the region, and that's a rural broadband permitting bill. We have parts of my district that don't have broadband, especially the Navajo Reservation. And it's very difficult to permit broadband across public land. It can take up to 9 years. And so we got good bipartisan support on that bill last year, but couldn't get it through the Senate to get to the president. And so we've reintroduced that bill, and I think that's an important bill for the area as well. And on the public lands bill...
Wait, hold on. Thank you so much for pushing that forward on behalf of a lot of people that don't have access to internet, because access to internet is economic development for a lot of rural communities.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely. Telehealth, so many things that we need that broadband for. And then the opportunity, can you imagine, as a new congressman to get involved in a public lands bill like the Emery County bill, and to see people come together who usually just don't come together on public lands bills. And I need to be very, very generous with my praise of the commissioners and the Public Lands Council in Emory County, who set up an environment where we could bring people together with very diverse opinions and be open-minded and find a place where they didn't get everything they wanted, but they all got quite a bit. Does that make sense? And a lot of times we address these public land bills with a winner-take-all philosophy. So if you're a miner, it's all mining, right? If you're a farmer, it's all grazing. If you're environmentalist, it's all protection. And we were able to come together on agreement on 1 million acres of appropriate use and preserve and protect areas and allow for recreation in other areas. And so my hat's off to those commissioners in Emory County. It's a difficult thing. You can imagine the pressure they were under by many of their constituents for giving up something that people didn't want to give up. And it was very, very difficult for them. I'm glad that Jake Bornstein is here. Jake, would you raise your hand? Jake is my legislative director in Washington, D.C. And Jake is an expert now in public lands shuttle diplomacy. His ability to go between groups and find out what they could work with, what was important to them, really is unmatched. And couldn't have done that without him. So just really pleased to have been part of that.
Thank you so much. Do we want to have just 1 or 2 comments on?
I just was going to say real briefly, I caught wind of the fact that in your research, you got a few pitches in at Joe's Valley rock climbing. And I was very impressed in your effort to really understand the issues. And I was excited that the bill went through. And as you know, the river is the boundary, and we're eager to include some of our areas as well. And I hope that we can get some pitches. And we have much more iconic desert towers here. So.
You know, I looked at the pictures of Joe's Valley, and there were some like experts with us, and they were like spiders going up these walls. And if you look at the pictures of me and of my staff, you kind of see like hands and knees and like the rear ends hanging out like 4 feet away from the wall. And it was really actually kind of embarrassing, but a lot of fun. There was a lot of discussion about making this broader than just Emory County. And at the end of the day, although we would love to have gone broader, we just knew that unless we kept it within the bounds of Emory County, we couldn't get it through. But we're very anxious to start dialogues now with Grand County, with other counties, and try to duplicate that process. And it would really complement the process they went through with that Public Lands Council. It was, as hard as that is, it had been so much harder if they hadn't been together as a community, if that makes sense on what they wanted.
Yeah. So maybe that's some future work.
Yeah, I'm excited to work, and I really appreciated in the bill how there was some support for local governments with like the sheriff outpost, out deeper in the wilderness, and there were some nice kind of land exchanges that benefited the counties as well. So we spent some time out there today, and the county built on BLM land a visitor center at their expense, and part of the bill was to give them that property where they had built that. Makes all the sense in the world. And it was nice because it was so locally driven that we were able to do things that if we were just relying on mines in Washington, D.C., we wouldn't have even known were issues or things that were important to do in the bill. Job well done.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Other comments?
Thank you. That's hard. We went through the process, Jane and I. It's a hard process. It's a difficult process with Public Lands Initiative. And you're right, people get very passionate. We had some very passionate meetings.
The PLI was before my time. I've tried to learn as much about it as I could. And I think part of it was the size, and that breaking it down to a county was helpful. And I think I've heard that there were people on all sides of the PLI who kind of had what people call poison pills, right? It says, well, if I can't get this, then I don't want to let anything happen. And we were really able to do a really good job of of keeping those poison pills out of the spill. And otherwise, there's no way it gets through.
Mm-hmm. Should we move on to, oh, and on behalf of what we call the fish squeezers in Moab, the people that are on the river that are doing all the work on behalf of, the endangered fish, thank you from them too.
I was stunned to learn that the Colorado minnow is a 6-foot fish. I don't know who named that, but I can't imagine getting one on the line. And
You would be in trouble.
in trouble. And I'm told that one of the species, Jake, do you know which one is close to coming off the endangered species list, which is Razorback, and shows some success, which I think is just really critically important that we can show some success with that. So good.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if you're aware that in Matheson Wetlands, they're making some
A hatchery.
habitats.
A nursery.
Fish nursery. So we're very excited about that.
Excellent.
A little nervous about high water this year and what's going to happen to it. But
Oh, yeah.
and
I was told by their biologists when we were down there, I think Mary was with us, that the native species are smart enough to understand when the water gets low to get the heck out of there and save their little skins, whereas the invasive species are not that smart. That's what she said. Is that what you said?
that's what, yeah, the person that works at the UMTA project that's the head of bringing it back, and rehabilitating the area, said that when they had the flood in 2011, it came over, got right up next to the pile, and all these fish were around. But when it receded, the only fish that flopped around and died there were the ones that were not native fish.
Nature's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest knew, oops, it's time to go.
Well, thank you again from all of us for your work with public lands. Moving on to healthcare legislation. So we wanted to have a discussion of programs providing stability to rural critical access hospitals, and then also give you the opportunity to talk about your POPI Act, POPI Study Act. I invited the CEO of Moab Regional Hospital, Jen Sadoff, to join us. I'm going to hand her the microphone because she definitely, come on up, Jen. Mary, will you make sure that it's on? She and I have talked about what the legislation is about, that really helps us keep doing what we're doing, providing healthcare for rural. So
I thought maybe I would start by showing you where public lands and healthcare intersect. This is our BIF board that we have in the ER at the hospital. The colors of the pins symbolize what people were doing and where they were doing it before they weren't doing it anymore.
Oh, now I get it, the BIF board.
yeah, like where you
The BIF
birthed and then you landed in the hospital.
Those of a certain generation will get who that person is holding the phone and why we call it Where's the BIF? But I did ask some people on my way in, and they had no idea who she was.
I remember her.
Yes. So thank you so much for being here, and I guess we can, I probably don't want to hold this the whole time. It's actually really great. We went digital with a lot of things.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming down and learning a little bit more about rural healthcare. I'm Jen Sadoff, and I'm the CEO at Moab Regional Hospital. I've been here in Moab for 19 years and at the hospital for 7 years and in my position for 4 years. I also serve on the board of the Utah Health Information Network and Western Healthcare Alliance, and so I really appreciate anything we can do to improve access to internet down here. It's really, really important for telestroke, teleburn, and all of the other specialties that'll be coming down the line through telemedicine. I just wanted to kind of give you the hits on who we are as a hospital. We are a critical access hospital in the truest sense of the word. We're 100 miles away from ICU or from a NICU. And it's great if we can take a helicopter over there, but there are lots of days a helicopter can't fly, which means, an hour and 45-minute ground transport. We're also a level 4 trauma center. That turns out to be pretty important considering where we live. And we're a not-for-profit hospital. And as you might guess from Moab, we are a completely independent, maybe even fiercely independent hospital without any association or ties with corporate hospitals or other bigger system hospitals. Which has its pros and it also has its cons. There's a lot of things that are challenging in healthcare. There's more regulations every single day, literally. I get an update almost daily on a new regulation that we need to work with somewhat limited staff on, trying to figure out, all right, who's gonna report on this? Who's gonna send in this information? It seems like electronic medical record systems never want to work with whatever program that they have collecting that information. So it can be really challenging. But it's important for our economy. We have over 220 people who are employed by Moab Regional Hospital, and many, if not most, of those jobs are probably some of the higher paying jobs in our area. We are the largest private employer in Grand County and San Juan County. So really, all rural healthcare is super important for the local economy and the success of the area. Very typical community health needs assessment profile for a rural town. High rate of substance use disorder, low access to mental health care, and poverty as a barrier to health care. So, so those are the things that, you know, you probably hear this in every single rural town that you stop at. So there's probably two programs that I would say, if mountain biking is our bread, these two programs are our butter. They are the DISH program. Are you familiar with the Disproportionate Share Hospital program?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes.
I didn't know by the acronym, but yeah.
Yep. So we provide approximately $4 million per year in uncompensated care to our community. Most of that goes to our community. A little bit goes to visitors, but primarily here. The DISH program is sort of always in motion. And I don't have a specific request for these two programs today, other than every time a change is going to happen to these programs, the devil is completely in the details of how it will impact rural hospitals. And my only request is, if something's gonna change, please reach out to one of the rural hospital administrators to talk about what the impact will be. Because we do not have the same lobbyists who are like, let me tell you about the 9 rural independent hospitals in Utah and how this might impact them. But the big system hospitals are definitely making sure they're covered. So the DISH program is a really important one for us. It brings about $800,000 to $1 million a year to help us offset that cost of uncompensated care. So, you know, pays for approximately a quarter of it. The other really important program is the 340B program. And that one, you know, I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry has like 1 or 2 lobbyists who might be talking about that on a regular basis. But for us, last year it brought in $462,000. And we're able to leverage that money to put, like this year we took it and we put a care coordinator in the clinic to work with Medicaid and Medicare patients to help. It's a nurse care coordinator, so it helps them work with patients outside of a clinic visit, so that you know, most healthcare doesn't happen in our walls. It happens outside of the walls of our building, and so that care coordinator will reach outside of the walls to really make sure we're addressing social determinants of health where we can. We've also used it to start an addiction medicine program. You know, opioid addiction is a problem everywhere. It's actually not our worst substance use problem here in Grand County. Methamphetamines and alcohol far surpass opioid use in terms of what we see in our building. But still, opioid addiction is a problem everywhere. Our clinic is full. We're currently recruiting for a psychiatrist to come down here full-time to offer psychiatry and run an addiction medicine program. So there's so much opportunity for that 340B program money to really do good things in communities. And I think it gets a bad rap. So if you're going to cut it, just give me a call, because I will give you a great rap. I really think that's it. I'm curious to hear more about your Poppy Act, so I'll hush it.
Good.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yes, and so well articulated. We will watch those two. I have Liz, I'm not sure if Liz has communicated with you, but Liz Whitlock in my office handles healthcare. She was with us until yesterday in Price and then had to go back up, but we'll definitely link up on those two issues. I was also pleased that we did get some long-term funding for CHIP. I'm sure that's also equally as important to you. Yeah. And community health centers, also very important. I'm curious, have you seen, we've tried to work with the VA program and particularly make it so those in the rural areas didn't have to travel to Salt Lake and could use local health care more. Have you seen any increase at all?
Well, here at the VA telehealth clinic in Moab, they primarily work with the Grand Junction Hospital. And so that's their main liaison. Grand Junction's about an hour and a half away. So most veterans here in this community try to establish their care there because it's a closer drive. Okay. It's a subject really close to my heart because my dad, the whole reason I'm in healthcare is my dad, I had to move him out here and navigate his care for 4 years, and he was a veteran. Oh no, what if I cry in this public meeting? And so it is really important to help them access opportunities. There's the new, I think it's like Veterans Choice Program. We get a new contract from whatever program's administering the VA. It seems like almost every couple of months. It'd be nice to really stabilize that and at least get paid Medicare rates would be great. Yeah. But, you know, we have a good relationship, and I think they've done a lot of work, and there's still a lot more work to be done. Good.
I'd welcome any feedback, especially with your insight on that issue about how we're doing on that as we go forward. Opioids are something that I'm really, you hear a lot about Washington, about the partisanship nature of Washington. And I had a really cool experience. One was to have one of the opioid bills myself, but I watched a package of 67 opioid bills go through Congress. And I had a fun moment where, for a while, we were in the majority, and I got to actually preside on the House floor while these opioid bills were coming through. And I love to share with people what happened, because it's not what you hear in the press. The Republicans would stand up to debate these bills and say something like this: "These are good bills. We'd like to thank our Democratic colleagues for their support on these bills. We hope you'll support the bills." Then the Democrats stood up to do their debate, and they said, "These are good bills. We'd like to thank our Republican colleagues for their help on these bills. We hope you'll vote for these bills." 67 bills went through on a near unanimous support through the House, through the Senate, and then signed by the President. And most of us didn't even read about that in the paper, right? Yeah. On such a significant issue, we worked together on a bipartisan, and so I'd like to share that, because it does show that we can come together and work on these very difficult issues. I think, in my opinion, the country is starting to wake up a little bit to opioids. Everyone from the doctors who were prescribing it to patients who were receiving it, and we're realizing that we must explore other alternatives for pain. We can't ignore the pain, but we've got to explore other alternatives. And I think these 67 bills were Congress's attempt to put some clarity and some regulation and some direction, everything from how many opioids we prescribe and things like that. My particular bill was sensitive because in Utah, I learned that we lead the nation in opioid prescription to women in pregnancy. Not only do we lead the nation, we double the national average in Utah. So my bill was dealing with that, simply asking for a study to get to prescribing habits to help us understand why we're double and what we can be doing to alleviate pain. I'm careful on this subject because almost every time I talk about it, somebody will come up to me afterwards and say, "You know, I know somebody in chronic pain and they need opioids," and I don't want to dismiss the fact there is an appropriate role for opioids in chronic pain, and we're not talking about removing it from everybody. we need to do much better on it. And I feel like Congress leading out with these, doctors better understanding how to prescribe, patients better understanding what they're taking are all really important parts of that, and that we'll hopefully see it. But you make a really interesting point when you say it's maybe not your biggest problem here, because some of us, like are old enough to remember the Wendy's commercial, have seen something, and that is that we go through LSD, crack cocaine, meth, opioids, and we solve kind of one. And if we don't solve the underlying problems that are turning people to these substances, then there'll just be something that will come along, right, and be the next way that people deal with many of these underlying issues. And I'm hearing a lot more about mental health than I've ever heard before in my life. My son is an intern in a residency in a psychiatry program up in Corvallis, Oregon. And yeah, his mother and I would dearly like to get him back to Utah. Yeah, and so that also I mention that because I think it helps me stay even more in tune with the needs on that side of health, and that I think we're realizing more and more as a society that it's not just always physical health. Mental health is a very important part of our overall health.
Well, I think that the addressing opioid use during pregnancy and also during adolescence is really important. They say that, I think I'm pulling these numbers off the top of my head, I didn't write them down, but I think your likelihood of future addiction increases by 30% if you use an opioid prior to the age of 18 as prescribed. And so, doctors, trust me, I work with them every day. They love it when we tell them what to do. I mean, they're just like, yes, tell me more how I should have an interaction with my patient. But regulations sometimes do help provide a structure, for what they're doing, which is a mixture of both art and science. And so I appreciate your work on it. I always think too, how do we get some of the funding for, that Congress is starting to allocate for these problems down into smaller areas where often our numbers they're not really compelling on grants.
Right.
And so they want us to partner with these big areas that, regionally are hard to get to. It's hard to build the relationships with Price and beyond. But if we don't do that, then we don't have the numbers to justify getting the grants. And it does make it really hard to get things happening in these small, isolated communities. So maybe just keep that in mind. Absolutely. And tell them, send the money to Moab, San Juan County, and beyond.
Emory. Carbon.
Yeah.
Wayne County.
And it's worth it to say, too, that it's not just economic development, that when you have strong healthcare, you have economic development because people are more likely to move and locate in a community that's got strong healthcare because of safety. Yeah. So it's safety for all of us.
And likewise, there's clearly a correspondence between low employment and opioid use.
Yeah.
Between what? I didn't hear.
I said low employment. I mean, actually, low unemployment and opioid use. The worse the economy is doing, the more you'll see opioid use.
Yeah, and it's a big problem in Price.
Yes.
Especially.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if we want to keep talking about this, but I would actually like to move on, if it's okay with everybody, to the possibility of federal collection of applicable sales and transient room tax, TRT, for camping sites on federal lands. I don't know who wants to speak to that, if Evan or if you want to speak to that.
Sure. I probably won't be as eloquent as Ms. Sadoff, but that's, especially for us in the county, a lot of the sales tax that happens in city limits goes to the city. And so for the county, we collect a transient room tax from visitors that are staying the night in hotels, and a lot of folks that are attracted to the area come to enjoy being under the night sky and out in the fresh air and enjoy camping. And the BLM is every year adding more and more campsites, and just as much as every time you come to town you see more hotels, you might not be noticing that there's more and more campsites every year too. And in a way, that's kind of a lost revenue for the county. And so if we were able to collect similar transient room tax on those campsites, it could be a big benefit, especially since that impact that those visitors are bringing are being shouldered by, you know, our law enforcement responding further and further and further out to BLM when the neighbors won't be quiet in the campground, or if they're trying to make their way on the BIF board. You know, our EMS is going further and further. Our solid waste district is dealing with more and more trash from visitors. But unfortunately, we're not allowed to collect any of those taxes on federal lands. And so that would be a big question mark for us. I think that we have seen some of our neighboring states. In Idaho, they've figured out a way to collect a transient tax on a monument there. And we kind of get stonewalled a bit when we approach the feds. So.
And just to follow up too, so Dead Horse Point State Park, camping, tax collected. Private campgrounds, obviously, tax collected. Federal campsites, no tax collected. We'd like to investigate collecting tax on collecting tax. Now, Representative Tim Quinn in the state had his sales tax bill, and it's probably worth it when we talk about broadening the base. When we think of broadening the base down here, we don't have professional services that could, you know, that we would see the windfall that other communities would in Utah. But this could be something that actually would broaden our base, and I don't know if it would be there'd be a place to not just have a conversation on the federal level, but on the state level as well for leverage to see if we can make that happen.
So I'm looking at Jake, who's my legislative director and our expert on things like this. I don't know if you have anything, Jake, you want to share other than we're happy to go back and look at it.
Yeah, I'd say if you look at, as long as I've worked here, this hasn't really been a topic of discussion in the committee, at least yet. You know, the congressman sits on the federal land subcommittee with jurisdiction over all those issues, so yeah, happy to keep the dialogue going.
So we'd love, especially, Evan, you mentioned a situation in Idaho where they are collecting it.
Yeah.
That's something we'll take a really hard look at. And then would love maybe offline to find out who you've been talking to that's not been highly receptive, or
it was more just kind of like kicking the tires.
Okay.
There hasn't been,
So good.
or I haven't been involved in any
we'll help you
direct conversation.
take those questions to the next level, and I'd love to know what they're doing in Idaho. That might be a model
Yeah.
for moving forward. I think I love mayors. And have a real appreciation for them because of my time as a mayor. So as you talk about some of these issues, I totally get how critical it is to have the appropriate revenue streams to do what you're asked to do. And I'll tell you, wherever I go, I say, look, do you realize your best tax dollar is on the local level? If you think about what you provide, police, fire, sewers, you know, all the things, the services that you provide, and you get these little slices of income. It's amazing, actually. And so anything, I'm really in tune with the fact that these revenue sources are critical to you. And if you have a use that's not, you know, paying that its share of burden, that's a serious thing. And would love to look at that with you.
I appreciate that.
So Congressman Curtis, I just spoke with Jennifer Jones, who works. What's her title?
She's she's in charge of recreation for the BLM resource planner,
resource management.
Now field director, recreation chief.
So for 2018, BLM numbers were at 2.9 million in our area right here, and so for us, I mean, we're a community of, between the county and the city, over 10,000. So the numbers are astronomical. And I mean, the services, we can figure out where to spend the money. EMS, yeah, I mean,
EMS alone.
EMS alone. I mean, yeah, the numbers were through the roof this last year as well. And
trash mitigation, sewer, like everything that Evan mentioned. But I mean, to know what those numbers are compared to what the size of our community is, it's a big deal for us.
And I would say we can look at the federal issue, and the state issue is obviously the time is right, because they'll be going into this discussion. So any movement there, this would be a critical time to get the issue in front of the state legislators and the governor.
Because it's one thing if Moab is asking the federal government if we can collect tax. It's another thing if we can get our state leadership to put forward that conversation and that ask.
I had the head of the chair of the travel council asked me to present because he couldn't be here, a couple of the topics on this. And one thing
Mary, I'm sorry, will you pull your mic
I'm sorry.
toward you? Just
yes,
for the...
thank you. I'm sorry.
No
yes. It would take, if we were able to do transient room tax right now, where they're charging $15 for each site, it would be $16.92. You could round it to 17 or leave it there. So, I mean, you take those numbers and multiply, that dollar, almost $2, it would really take us a long ways. We have as many people, our search and rescue responds to as many search and incidents as Salt Lake City area.
Yeah. Is the 2.9 overnight visitors?
It was her BLM data, because we were trying to...
I believe that's the only way they have to track it, because people come and go during the day.
So those are stays.
Those are
filling out the
stay.
envelope
and
dropping the envelope in the Iron Ranger. So
good. We'd love to dig into it with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's Jake. That we have to.
Jake? Yeah.
Yep.
Jake's
Okay.
my legislative director and works with us at DC, and
he's great.
I know the legislators here.
Yeah.
Great help. Thank you, Jake. He really helped us.
Well, maybe we could put together a group that could have a conference call with you, Jake, so to follow up with this conversation. Sure, come on up, Chris. There's a microphone right there. Introduce yourself for the representative.
My name's Chris Baird. I'm the clerk auditor for Grand County. And just to clarify some of the communication we've had with the State Tax Commission on this issue, we've asked them if they feel like the federal government is non-compliant with state law, and they believe that they are non-compliant, and that if they were compliant, that they would be collecting and remitting transient room tax because the end user is not tax exempt. And so I don't know if it's so much a matter of changing laws as it is establishing a cooperative agreement with the federal agencies to comply with state law. And so that's the standing that I understood in my discussions with the State Tax Commission. And that's why the state parks collect and remit transient room tax, because it's the law. However, with the Tax Commission, they said that we can compel the state agencies to comply, but we cannot compel the federal government to comply. And so that's part of the issue.
Information. Yeah.
And in 2017, for the first time, the transient room tax collections eclipsed the property tax collections. It became the single greatest revenue stream for our general fund in Grand County. So it's a very important revenue stream for us. And so it's somewhat of an issue of having a small proportion of private property and a lot of economic activity outside of that private property. So something to consider there. And so I just wanted to frame the discussion in the sense that it's been up to this point, but I'm not aware that anybody has actually sat down and met with any representatives of the federal government and discussed this issue, to my knowledge.
Yeah, it's the first time that we're hearing about it. And
I think there was mention actually at our last joint meeting. Somebody in our on one of the councils did mention it, but it was your other staffer that said, "Oh, well, you can't do that. It's federal land," and then it just kind of we moved right along. And I think that's the bounce that we've been receiving, but we're kind of ready to.
Okay. I'm glad you brought up property tax, because your alternative is to put the burden on your very few property owners, and it's much more appropriate for users than.
Well, we estimate, projecting growth from the last census that we've got about 10,400 permanent residents in Grand County, and we host 3 million tourists a year. And so, putting that burden on the taxpayers, the property taxpayers, the local ones, to support infrastructure and services for 3 million tourists is a tall order.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that additional information. So we're kind of at other federal related topics of interest, unless we want to talk any more about TRT. It's 6:40 right now. We can talk for another 10 minutes and then open our pockets and then walk over to Star Hall, if that sounds
absolutely
okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, council members,
I'll hit you with 2 random ones. One that I'm sure is not of any secret to you is there's some concerns nationally about coming up with funding for the National Land and Water Conservation Fund, and I was just curious if you could give us a little insight about if you thought that was likely, or if there's anything we can do. Our council had, at one point at the city council, written a letter in support of reviving Land and Water Conservation Fund, but obviously we want it to be funded, so anything extra we can do there would be great to know about.
Utah is fortunate in this case to have Chairman Rob Bishop leading natural resources. He would like to see this solved. And in addition, the shortage of funding for our national parks is high on his list. And so I think you can feel like there is a lot of support here in the delegation for that. I'm trying to think of a specific way to answer your question on how you can be helpful other than, Jake, do you want to?
Just to clarify, funding for LWCF, so in the...
Can we get you a microphone? Do you want to just come on up and... Just because other people are participating via YouTube.
So the bill that recently was signed by the president that included the Emory County bill and the Fish bill, as well as a bunch of other Utah bills, permanently reauthorized LWCF, so the funding stream's coming in. So that's in perpetuity. With that said, we will still have a yearly appropriations to actually give that money out. But just want to clarify that did get reauthorized. So it's bringing more money in the fund, which it wasn't for the past few months.
Okay, yeah, I guess there was some confusion about funding, so thank you, that's helpful.
Might as well stay there. Yeah. What was your other?
And I know some other colleagues have questions, so I'm going to make this one brief, and you can probably come back to this in the town hall, but obviously another big federal issue, immigration, and Utah back in 2010 had the Utah Compact, and I'm not sure if it's something that you followed at the time, but some people have asked me recently, like, whatever happened to that, and where do people stand on it now? And I'm just going to ask you.
I love the Utah Compact. I read it not more than a few weeks ago again. I think Utah was way out in front of the nation on that, and it's been very helpful to me because it gives very clear direction to what Utah expects from its federal elected leaders. It doesn't give a specific formula for how we solve the problems, but it lays out principles. And one of those principles deals with compassion, right, and families, and I think those are just really important Utah values. So I am very supportive of the compact, and as I look at legislation that comes before me, I always have the compact in the back of my mind. It may come up tonight, so I'll give you kind of this much version, and we may get a much deeper version tonight, but I can tell you that it's been one of my biggest disappointments in Congress that we haven't been able to move the ball forward in any way, in any category on immigration. We've tried both massive reform and we've tried little bites and pieces of it and haven't been able to advance any of them. It'll be interesting to see. I'm kind of predicting that in the next month or two we will see in the House a vote on Dreamers because now the Democrats are in control. And I've told my staff, okay, be ready. I'm leaning towards supporting it. Now I haven't seen the legislation, The only thing I wouldn't like about that is that I think we could solve multiple problems at once. And when you have, some people would not support the Dreamers, but they would support it if there were other parts of immigration in it. And so my preference would be to roll those together. Last fall, we voted on a bill that, I'll admit it was imperfect, but I supported it because it included the Dreamers and border security, and we had these two groups who usually are very, very separate on their opinions, kind of agreed to come together and say, look, I'll support you if you support me, and both groups were saying that, and we quickly put together a bill, and the night before the bill, the two groups that had done this did that, and it didn't pass. I think people need to be prepared for an imperfect immigration bill. And what I mean by that is if we hold it up to perfection and demand that I don't vote on it unless it's perfect, we're not going to see it. And so I'm just hopeful that we can get something before us that can get advanced. There are a number of areas where this is really hurting Utah. Economic development is one of them. We have a myriad of industries, and you probably see it here in the hospitality industry, that could really use this host of workers that are willing to come legally to our country, work hard, pay taxes, obey every single rule, and yet we're filtering too dramatically the number of people that can come in, and it's hurting not just hospitality, but agriculture, recreation, and many areas are being hurt. I'd love to see some progress with that. And I'm hopeful we can move it forward, but it's just, we haven't been able to move anything forward.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Others?
I just have one. I watched a program on PBS NewsHour on these people that were attempting to get some legislation passed to put more restrictions on asbestos, because we are still producing it and using it in a lot of things, even crayons. And people are dying. We still have a number of people who are dying. So I just ask you, when you're approached to, support a bill that will limit the production of asbestos, I'd appreciate it.
I had not heard that. I would be very interested if you, also welcome you, Mary, to let me know if you see that bill coming. We're very dependent on people helping us watch these bills. In a given week, I'll vote on 40, 60 bills. Mm-hmm. And it really is helpful as constituents come to us and point things out to us that we
What's the best way?
There's nobody better at it than Mary. I'm just here to tell you. Reach out to Lori. We've talked about Jake a lot, but Lori's my district director, and out of the Provo office, reach out to Lori. Reach out to our DC office. All you have to, especially if you're, it helps when everybody does it, but we love to hear from elected officials, but identify yourself and just let us know, hey, we're watching this bill, please take a close look at it. And you may, this point's really important to us.
I will look up that program and get you the number of the bill, what's going on.
What else?
I would add in just kind of keeping a general eye out for environmental issues, especially around clean air and clean water. I know I'm preaching to the choir about air quality in Utah, but I get scared about what might be happening on the federal level, and I would just give you my support for protecting air quality and water quality, and we got your back.
Thank you.
Take them to the mat.
I heard something that I really liked yesterday.
Thank you, Evan.
If you haven't, take a minute and Google Provo Clean Air Toolkit. It was what we put together in the city of Provo. And Robert Groh with Envision Utah told me they're actually going to make a state version of that. And what I really like about it is it takes individual groups. So it takes us individually, it takes government, it takes large business, small business, higher education, and it breaks it down into categories and then lists all of our responsibilities and ways that we can help and contribute. And I think that's important because sometimes we just say, oh, darn, if only big business would solve this, and yet you look at a typical church parking lot and you'll see 3 cars for one family that lived 3 blocks away, right? And so we all have a responsibility in this. So I think that's one area where I can take a good example back to Washington, D.C. I can tell you, too, that I think we're learning how to talk about this in a far more productive way than we sometimes have. And sometimes when we revert to things that some people can't even comprehend, if that makes sense, then we don't make progress. And I think that's why I like this Clean Air Toolkit. It kind of breaks it down into bite-sized pieces that people can actually look at and say, oh yeah, I can see how we can make progress on that. And my sense is, much like the Utah Compact, that Utahns care deeply about clean air and water and the environment. We don't always know how to articulate that, but I think they do care, and they're looking for guidance and mentors, if that makes sense, to do better.
Yeah, and data helps.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of great scientists here that are collecting a lot of data, so
We sure do.
keep funding that.
Well, Representative Curtis, thank you so much for coming to meet with the city and county councils tonight before your town hall. And I just got to say, you filled the shoes of a representative that was unwilling to come down and participate in town halls with us. And your willingness to do this, not just with us, but with communities across Utah. It takes a lot of time. We know how long of a drive it is to Provo for you to come down and visit us. So thank you so much from all of us for being present, for representing us, for listening to our concerns. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You make it so delightful for me to visit. It's easy to come back. I want to come back. I may, if I got just to have a second, let me tell you about my trip.
Okay.
Because it's really pretty fun. We started Tuesday in Provo and spent much of Tuesday. Well, we started in Provo, but we spent much of Tuesday in Price there and holding a town hall meeting in Price. Started early this morning in Castledale, meeting with a constituent early, and then the mayor of Emery City a little bit later, and then we got in a Jeep and drove out and looked at the swell and some things out there that had been part of the bill. And then actually went and looked at an old pioneer church that we're trying to figure out how to save. And oh yeah, we stopped at the high school, had a lot of fun with Emery County High, and talked about the bill there with the students and answered some of their questions. And they had a lot of really good questions.
Not just a town hall, but like a student town hall?
We had a student town hall.
That is so cool.
Yes, and really good questions. And then we hustled over here, stopped to see where they're putting the tailings, made one stop with the highway patrol. Came here, we had the town hall meeting tonight. Tomorrow we're off to go further south. We'll have meetings all day tomorrow further south at the town hall in Bluff. And then I'm really excited for the last part of the trip. We're actually visiting the Zunis, the Navajo tribe, and the Ute Mountain Utes, and meeting with all of them. And I'm trying to build a relationship with them. And as we mentioned at the first, there's just a ton of work in the district that needs to be done there. And we'll have a town hall meeting with the Navajos. And we're somewhere, I've stopped counting at 125 in 15 months of these town hall meetings. Wow. And the only way I can explain that is for some strange reason, I enjoy them. And they're really the best way that I have found to stay in touch with the district. Social media, as you know, you get a slice, right? But it's not necessarily representative. The emails and phone calls that come in, they give you a slice, but you don't really know how well it represents the district. But coming and standing in front of you and hearing your questions and quite frankly, being accountable for how I vote, I think is really important. So thank you. And it's just been a delight to meet with you. And thank you for the gifts and the flowers and the pocket treats. And now we better start moving over there.
Motion to recess?
I'll make a motion to recess and fill your pockets with treats.